got a ton of leaks coming off the throttle body spacer here. So it looks like we're just gonna need some new gaskets. So we got the intake kind of cobbled together for now. We're gonna bring it in now so we can weld the O2 bung onto it. So just a reminder, this car is a 1.6 to 1.8 swap, and the quick and dirty way of doing it is, as in terms of the exhaust side anyways, is 1.8 header with the 1.6 mid pipe, and that actually all lines up and bolts up, but it gives you a problem where you don't have an O2 bung. So on the 1.6, the header or the O2 sensor is actually in the header, and then on the 1.8 it's on the mid pipe. So we've got both combinations together that neither one have a solution for the mid pipe or for the O2 sensor. So I'm going to try to start this up. Well, I guess I can't, because since this is, yep, so this car's a 90, so the 90s don't actually have a trunk release within the car, so you actually have to open it up with the key. And the reason why I got to open the trunk is because it usually helps if you have a steering wheel to drive the car, right? So let's put that back in. Now I haven't tuned this. I've set it up for the injectors and did some quick and dirty tuning, but without a wideband there's only so much I can do, right? Sounds like a Subaru. Oh, okay, doesn't sound like a Subaru. All right, so now that it's surprisingly running, okay, so that either needs cold start enrichment or an actual tune. So I could probably limp it into the shop. Okay, cool. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and limp it into the shop. We'll let it run for a second so we can just let it kind of warm up a little bit. We'll get into the shop and then we'll start welding on an OT bung for this thing. So in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and move out this STI that we have in the shop. Well, this is not great. They straight piped it with no flanges whatsoever. They're also missing bolts on the motor mount, nuts on the motor mount, and that is just one piece there. So they still got the stock muffler, but it's been welded, and then they deleted the flange and then welded some generic cat with no flanges on it, but none of that's our problem. So we're just gonna tap that here and then put our OT sensor in. So this is for the Miata, because he's not a boosted car. He's only got a wideband that needs to get installed. So JT 3D printed this for us. This is the factory piece that goes over the steering column, and then here's our new 3D printed piece. And we do have to glue this together though, but it has a pedal stool and the actual gauge pod that all goes together. So we're going to get started on gluing this together so that way it can start to cure. And then in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and start moving the Miata out, and it'll sit there for a little bit until I can get back to it to finish up wiring everything. Here's the gauge pod for the Miata here. We went ahead and threw some adhesive on it since it was printed in 3 pieces. So let's set this thing on here and see what it looks like. Ah, come on, come on. Looks pretty good, I think. I don't like how it covers the charge light and all that other stuff, but overall though I think it looks pretty good. It's pretty clean. So I guess in hindsight we could have rotated it over a little bit for it to be over the tachometer a little bit more, but you know, overall I think it's pretty good. Okay, so on the Miata, we're going to tap the AAM into the ECU now. We're actually going to tap power and ground here off of these, and this is like the main ground. So these two black wires are the main grounds that go into the harness, and then this is like the main power wire for the auto air control valve, injectors, but it all comes off the main relay and it's fused. So we're just going to tap it here and just be done with it. And then on the flip side, we will start wiring up the CAN bus for the wideband into the Megasquirt. Okay, so I made a mistake, and this is why I was kind of questioning the MS2's CAN bus. So I remember early on that it had CAN bus, but you couldn't use it for wideband. But I wired it up anyways. These are the CAN wires here, and it obviously didn't work. So upon doing some more reading, the MS2's CAN bus is designed for other Megasquirt type items. So for instance, you could communicate to a Microsquirt, you could communicate to like their amp BFI's EGT module, but you can't do it from external non-same addressed, non-same bus CAN bus items. So obviously the AAM doesn't work. Now the good thing about the AAM is that you can see that on older installs there was just one wire for 0 to 5 volt. What would happen though is that you would get what's called sensor offset, and what would happen is that the gauge and the AAM, or the gauge and the ECU, would read two different things, and there was no way to correct it because it was always different. So AAM added a 0 to 5 volt positive wire and then a 0 to 5 volt ground wire, right? And so what you do is you just take the ground wire, tie it to sensor ground, and then the white wire goes to your normal 0 to 5 volt. And that actually gives you accurate readings once it's configured. Now, if you don't have sensor ground or not an easy way to tap it, you can in fact still regular ground it, but you really want to ground it to a shared ground on the ECU. So I've already tested it out, but I'm going to go ahead and just plug it in. And on the software, we now have wideband working. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to clean these wires up, but that side is basically good to go there. So here we are. We're waiting on the throttle cable here, bracket from Flying Miata to come here. We should have that tomorrow. So if all goes well, we'll have that included into the video. So we've got our intake built with bracketry. We've got ports for the auto air control valve. We had to use some heater hose connectors to get it all connected, but we got it there. And then we've got a port now for the PCB. And all that is done. We've got a nice little 2.5-inch filter here, but I suspect that there's a vacuum leak here. The reason why I suspect that is that in the software I have the auto control valve turned to 0, and then I've already adjusted the screw for the idle all the way in, and it's still idle 1200 RPM. Now I haven't synced timing yet, and it could be a timing thing. I highly doubt it, especially if you guys listen, you can hear that little weird whirring noise. So something is squealing there, and I don't know what it is. What we're gonna have to do though is we're basically, I guess I'm just gonna smoke test it real quick and then see if we can find where the leak's coming from. But we are making some decent progress. All right, so we got a ton of leaks coming off the throttle body spacer here. So it looks like we're just gonna need some new gaskets. Alright, here are the two gaskets for the Miata. These are Felpro part numbers 60984 and 60874. I don't know which is which. Oh, it's right here. So this one is the 1.6, this one's the 1.8. And the reason why we need both is because we're using the 1.8 intake manifold, but the 1.6 throttle body with the Flying Miata spacer in between them. So we obviously need a gasket on per side. So we'll get that swapped over, and then we should be able to start it up and get it going. So we pulled out the throttle body, and this bottom hole isn't lined up. They only had 3 out of the 4 that we didn't realize until we pulled it out. So Jeremiah's back there drilling a hole here, and then once that's drilled, everything should work. That's why it wasn't sealed though. So this hole is not lined up right here. So we're just gonna drill it out, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we got all back together. I had to start it up and it did not stay running. So we're just gonna back off this idle screw. I turned it all the way in last time just because I thought that maybe the screw wasn't adjusted correctly, causing a high idle, but obviously it's not. So the idle valve is completely closed right now. So we're gonna see if we can get this thing to idle on its own, hope without the idle valve in the way. Okay, so it's holding 500 RPM with the valve all the way open. It is also extremely rich. We needed to get up to op temp, so we don't have any warm up enrichment before we can set the idle. So there's something going on with the idle valve. I have the idle and the throttle completely open, and the valve is set at 100%. And I've already made some changes while off screen. So I made a ton of changes, just trying to change the frequency, trying to change inverting it and stuff like that. And unfortunately, the idle valve is not working. So it could be from just sitting for too long, and you know that does happen. These throttle bodies on the older ones, they have coolant running through them as well sometimes. I don't know if this one is one of those that do, and sometimes it just can get clogged up and stuck. But unfortunately at this point, there's not too much I can do here. So I'm gonna leave that as is. I'm gonna go ahead and start setting the timing. What I don't like though is that the vacuum here is actually pretty high. Normally it's down here like in the 30s, but this guy is in the 50s. So either there's a vacuum leak somewhere, which I don't think there is because we smoked it. All right, so we got it all back together, smoke tested it, and it passed the smoke test no problem. So now we just let all the smoke drain out and we just wrap it all back up. It could be a bad vacuum source. Again, I don't think so because it's right off the intake manifold. Or there's something wrong with timing. Mechanically, there could be something wrong with timing. And that can also cause this to be wrong. So I'm gonna let it run and just kind of idle for a little bit and then just see what we can get. Okay, so we got timing set up, and the timing on the base map was way wrong, which is not the base map's fault by any reason. It's just the base map. So we got timing synced, and let me show you guys really quick here so everybody is just on the same page here. Hopefully you guys can see it because I know there's a reflection. So when you're setting up timing, you basically set it to whatever you tell it here. So here we have 15 degrees. So on the base map, it starts off it's set at 3.5. And as you can see, we had to go to -8.5 to get it there. So we could have alternatively rotated the cam angle sensor to do it, or you can just set it in the software. But you really don't want to be like from 0. You want to be plus or minus 10-ish. And that's kind of where we ended up. And because we got timing was that far off, guess what? When we put it all back, the vacuum advance is where it needs to be. So on the actual map earlier, it was hovering in the 50 kPa area, like right here, but now it's down to 40, so it's actually right about here. So that's relatively normal. So I'm super happy with that. So it's all basically set up now. The only thing that we're waiting on is the throttle cable adapter from Flying Miata, and then we can put that sucker in, clean up our wiring down here, and it's actually ready to tune.